Alright, welcome back. So in this video, I want to now talk about the experience that I had with actually charging my subconscious to heal my body. So I just titled it Using Chi Energy for Healing. I didn't write anything because I'm just going to talk from experience, from memory. So this happened a couple of years ago now, maybe like 2 years ago. I believe it was 2 years ago. Anyway, so yeah, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience charging my subconscious for chi. I know how to do it; it's very easy, but I just don't do it. So we actually now talked about a lot of the consequences of using your chi in a supernatural way. The first consequence, and the most important one, is that what you're doing could be illegal, right? So it's not approved by God, which is sinful, and when you do that, you're going against the will of God. You could get psychically possessed. Nothing turns out right when you go against the will of God. So that's number one. But then the other thing is that you can have, well, ties into that, but you can have unwanted outcomes, right? So you never really know what's going to happen when you start manifesting your chi, right, on a conscious level or transcendentally. So it's always a little bit dangerous, right? So I just don't mess with it at all. I don't do much with it. But out of curiosity, right? So out of curiosity, one day, I was like, I think I'm going to go a little bit further with my charge, right? Like I said, I only deep charged the influence type psychic ability or using my chi. I only deep charged it pretty much one time. And that was this time. And it wasn't even really that much. It was only a couple days. I think I only was charging for about, 3 days, maybe 4, but I think it was 3 days. That was it. I could do this for weeks or months, right? So I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't know what would happen if I just kept charging. I still don't really know because I haven't done it. But like I said, I just taught you guys how to do it. You pray to God about this if you're interested in this. And you wait for his response. If you don't have a relationship with him like that, then you shouldn't be anywhere near this. You shouldn't even think about doing stuff like this. Like I said, I believe God just wanted me to tell you guys anyway how this stuff works, at least according to my understanding of it. So going back to what I was saying, so I decided out of curiosity that I'm just going to do it, right? I'm going to risk it because it is risky, right, to mess with your chi. But I'm going to risk it because I was so curious to see what would happen. And normally I'm not interested in stuff at all outside of the theoretical aspect of it. But for that whatever reason, at one time I was just curious to see what would happen. And like I said before, I wanted to pick something that was very almost safe, or as safe as can be, right? So I picked the healing intention, right? So very difficult to do something that's going to mess up my body if the intention is healing, right? That should fix my body in some way, right? And that's as opposed to doing some type of other intention that, let's say I want to build more muscle. I can use that intention as well, but that can cause a whole bunch of negative and unwanted outcomes and side effects and things like that. So no, I don't mess with that at all, right? So healing seems like the safest thing to use, and it's something that should, in theory, align with spiritual energy, right, if this is legal. So I decided to use healing. I decided I'm going to actually start charging. So using the techniques, that I told you about, I'm going to use these techniques to actually charge my subconscious to heal my body and just see what happens, right? So one of these symptoms I've noticed, I already told you guys about, right? I kept seeing this orange yellowish color and I kept thinking of the sun. Like I said, don't know why that is. It happens every time I have done healing, and I've done it other times in very short intervals, but not like a real long-term charge or a deep charge. But so it happened this time as well. This was the one and only time I really, you could say I deep charged it. It was only a couple days, but that's still basically going toward a deep charge. So that was one of these symptoms. So the other symptoms, so as I did it day after day, so I pre-charged like for roughly 2 days, and then I started main charging it. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in the last video is that once you have a certain amount of charge in your short-term memory, and like I said, we can also presume that you also have chi energy built up when that happens, you might be able to release it or manifest it in one large burst, which would be the burst action or an excitement burst for your charge. I've never done that. The closest thing I came to doing something like that with my chi is when the one and only time I did telekinesis. So I know that sounds crazy, but it happened. I'll probably talk a little more about that toward the end of the video. But you might be able to do something like that with healing. Like I said, I haven't done this much, but when I did do the healing, it kind of felt like I was doing an excitement burst, right? So not a super intense burst every single time, but still an excitement burst in general, which is generally how this is generally type of charge you would use for transcendental performance, right? Transcendental performance generally involves motion, right? So you're moving in some way. And it's the same thing here. The subconscious action would be motion, or your subconscious would express itself in the form of motion. And for motion, usually an excitement burst of some kind is preferred. And so I felt like I was using a burst action for this. Potentially, I could probably charge in a way to make an even more intense burst with the chi, but I never really did that. I haven't practiced that. But I just wanted to mention that may be possible. But when I was doing this, I pre-charged, and then I started main charging, and I would keep doing it in short intervals, exactly like I told you, and then I would go into longer intervals. And then, like, on the third day, when I was doing this, I could feel it. Like, so I could feel the energy really building, right? And because I'm now doing a little bit longer, I can really feel my chi starting to manifest the intent of healing, right? And I'm starting to feel the freaky symptoms, right? So the first thing I notice when I'm doing this, going that far with it, is I notice pretty much what I told you guys. I notice my spirit awakening, right? So I notice my spirit, on top of my pineal gland becoming more active. Oh, before I go into that, my pineal gland became more active because, like I said, to manifest your chi on something, your spirit has to sense it first, right? So I started, you have a connection to your body, right, through your silver cord, but that's still not the same as a transcendental connection. A transcendental connection requires intention. You have to actually draw your attention to your body. It doesn't matter that you're already super connected to it, right? So when I was charging the intention to heal my body, I focused on my body, my pineal gland started to activate, so now I'm sensing my body with my third eye. So it was funny because when I was doing it, and by the way, I didn't really have much of anything to specifically heal. I just wanted to see what would happen if I kept charging. But when I was doing it, right, my third eye started to turn on, I noticed that, like, in my mind's eye, so my imagination, that's where the voluntary aspect of psychic abilities will show up. I noticed I just kept getting images of, like, the inside of my body. I could see my organs, I could see my cells. It was kind of interesting, but everything looked healthy, right? It's like the way it looked, it looked a certain way, but I also had an inner knowing, right? Which is claircognizance. So I had an inner knowing that, okay, this is healthy. It looks this way, but this look is also associated with health. I just kind of knew that. And so my cells were so round, right? That was something interesting. They were very round, and I could tell that was a good thing. And I noticed my muscles, everything looked so pink inside. So I just thought that was interesting, but I could see it, right? And I could see everything in my mind's eye. So that'll always happen when you're using an influence-type psychic ability and you're transcendentally connecting to something. So I transcendentally connected to my body, started seeing it in my mind's eye. But then, like I said, as I started to really get into the deep charge around 3 days in, I started to have very freaky symptoms. So the first one that I started to have is, like I said, I started to feel my spirit, like, awakening, right? And I started to feel like all these kind of like vibrations, and it started to feel similar to those 2 times I mentioned, like, a couple chapters back. So I mentioned how I astral projected only 2 times in my life, or I started to really feel the symptoms, and it felt very similar to that. So it felt like my spirit, which is normally very dormant, right? I could feel it starting to, like, almost like turn on and activate, right? I felt like it was getting more energy because it's doing something. Your spirit's the one that controls your chi and manifests it. So it's a very interesting feeling, right? I just can feel it. It felt like I felt vibrations, and it's like I started to feel where my body ended and my spirit began. I can, like, distinguish between the two. It was kind of interesting. And what's interesting is I noticed that the feelings that we have inside of us, it's kind of hard to describe it, but the feeling inside of me, right? My spirit was always there, but it just didn't do anything, right? It's because it's always dormant. So I didn't know that certain feelings within me were actually attributed to my spirit. The only way I knew, right, is when my spirit started doing stuff and I had a reference frame to say, oh no, that feeling's my spirit. I just thought that was the inside of my body. It's kind of strange. I know it's a little strange to describe it that way, but that's kind of the best way I can describe it. Because now that my spirit's doing stuff, I'm like, oh, that feeling was always there, right? I didn't know that was my spirit, but that's how it felt, right? So it's actually doing stuff now, and it's kind of felt like it's turning on, and I have all these vibrations, and I can, like I said, I can feel where my spirit is. And I talked last chapter about how when you use your normal psychic abilities or your normal level of psychic abilities, which is just your intuition, you can sense things at a, you can still sense things psychically, but it's just not as strong, right? So it's not as strong and not as obvious because your third eye is not really turned on much. But I felt when this was happening, I felt like I could actually feel. Well, my third eye was turned on a lot more at this time. But I felt like I can sort of feel, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I felt like I can feel my spirit and sense in my spirit more, if that makes sense. Or just sense my spirit specifically more, right? Like I said, I could tell where my spirit ended and my body began, right? So it just became easier to kind of work with my spirit and think in terms of my spirit and sense it. And as I focused on that feeling of my spirit, we talked about it before in chapter 3, I think. When you focus on something, you hold an intention, and your subconscious responds to that tension in such a way where it alters your perception to tune out things that aren't related to the thing you want to focus on, and it alters your perception to tune in more to the thing you want to focus on. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that when my spirit started doing stuff, and I can notice it now, when I focus on that feeling, my perception became altered to hone in on that feeling even more, and then I could produce an intention to sort of influence that feeling more. So it actually became easier to kind of work with my spirit and do things and produce intentions that specifically target my spirit and not really my body. So it's kind of like a feedback loop. So that was interesting. I noticed that started happening, and I think that was necessary to continue healing, right? Because the healing action was coming from my spirit. So it was natural that I would need to focus more on my spirit to engage in this healing action as I charge, right? And so the other symptom I noticed is that it actually felt like a kind of healing energy was coming from my spirit and into my body, which was very interesting. I could feel it right here, right? It felt like it was entering my body right in my stomach area, which I think is where the silver cord generally is. But it felt like the energy was going from my spirit into my body. And what I think is happening there is, like I said, we'll talk more about this, maybe the video after next. I might skip some stuff that's in the book. But like I said, you get energy from God while sleeping in your spirit. I believe that energy goes into your etheric body, or it's regulated by your etheric body. And then it goes into your physical body. Right, and so I can feel the energy coming from my spirit. I don't know if my spirit holds on to the energy, or if I'd have to think about it. Maybe my spirit holds on to the energy, and then it goes into my etheric body, or immediately goes into my spirit, and then it goes to my etheric body. And what I was doing is just causing it to go into my physical body through my navel. I don't know. I have to think about it. I haven't really thought about it much, but that's what it felt like. It felt like it was coming through my stomach and into my body, my physical body. And this all felt good. Like, it didn't feel negative or bad. I wasn't depressed like I always am when I'm using psychic abilities to sense stuff, right, externally. Everything felt, it felt pretty good. It felt positive, right? But I felt like this healing energy was entering my physical body through my stomach. Now, the last, and that's pretty much most of it, but the last symptom was probably the freakiest, right? And that's when I started to feel cold, because I kept going in and out of a transcendental state. And as I keep entering a transcendental state, I'm expressing the subconscious action to heal, right? So I'm just doing it. Just like an emotion, you just do it, right? And I'm just healing my body, and I'm doing it more and more. And like I said, I'm charging spiritual energy at the same time as well. And so it feels pretty good and positive and pure, but now I'm expressing stronger and stronger healing actions, right, on my subconscious, so it has a stronger burst action. And so as it gets more intense, and as I can feel my spirit more, right, and I'm focusing on my spirit more, something strange started to happen. I could feel it getting really intense. And then I noticed I started getting cold, right? But what was interesting is I wasn't getting cold on the outside of my body, right? I was feeling cold on the inside. That was very strange, right? And I don't know that's ever happened to me before, except maybe when I had a fever. But I wasn't sick at all, right? It's never happened to me when I wasn't sick, right? It was the strangest feeling. But I was just started getting cold inside my body. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with this. So I was like, I did it for roughly 3 days. And I was like, okay, now I think I'm done. I'm done experimenting. Not really curious enough to know what's going to happen if I keep going, right? So I just stopped. And it took about maybe 20 minutes to get warm. I think 20, maybe 30 minutes, but I think about 20 minutes to get warm. And it's funny because it was such an interesting feeling. Like when you're cold inside your body, it takes so much longer to get warm than when you're cold on the outside of your body. Never experienced that before except when I was sick, but never experienced before when I wasn't sick, basically. So I just thought that was a very strange and interesting experience, right? But I finally got warm, and I still had that kind of, just like it's hard to describe, it's like a supernatural feeling after, which is this feeling of your spirit sort of being activated and turned on, right? And you kind of feel like now you have access to this kind of supernatural power, because we're not used to our spirit being in an awakened state and doing stuff, and especially our subconscious being volatile in the sense that it can cause our spirit to start doing stuff with our chi. We're not used to that feeling or that state at all, right? But that was the state I was in, and that's how I felt. And so then I stopped, and the volatility gradually decreased and lost energy and things like that. So that's pretty much it. That was the experience I had healing. I've never done it since then. That was, like I said, I think about 2 years ago. And I just haven't really been interested. I haven't been more curious to know what happens. I don't really care too much. Excuse me. Like I said, I don't really care too much to do this. I'm more interested in just understanding the theory. I might do this one day. Only because I think God might want me to. I haven't prayed on it. I haven't asked him about it. Well, I did pray about it recently, and that's the story I told you guys about. Because I think God wants me to do something with psychic abilities, so I prayed to him about it. Then I had that spiritual experience, which was pretty amazing. All right, so I could feel like the presence of this angel, and then it was like more of them when I was praying. And then I started using psychic abilities, but it wasn't this. I started using sensory type psychic abilities because I'm thinking maybe God wants me to. And then I started having dreams where he was like, no, not that kind of psychic ability. So he might, and I did pray to him again about it, and I think he might be talking about this stuff, but I just haven't done it yet. Maybe one day I will. But like I said, if you're interested enough in this stuff, you always pray to God, you always ask him, right, about this stuff. Because again, this can be dangerous, right? So I know, like I said before, I know that chi is generally portrayed as a super healthy thing. The supernatural version is dangerous. I think it's not the normal version, okay, fine. But when you start using it supernaturally, you're removing the dampening factor that your body has, which protects you, right? So if you're on a negative frequency, and especially if you don't have a relationship with God, you don't have spiritual energy, your chi is going to manifest negative intentions. So even if your intention is, even if you think your intention is positive, let me put it that way, the negativity of your frequency and the low spiritual energy is still most likely to cause your chi to manifest something negative in your body and hurt you. So this is going to be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. But again, this is all just a theory, right? I haven't done much with this stuff, right? So this is all theoretical. But yeah, that's just my theory on it, and that's the experience I had. So, before I move on, like I said, I did it one time with telekinesis, right? So one time, and I think I mentioned the story, but I'll just say it again. I was just messing around out of curiosity, because this was actually when I was in the zone with psychic energy. That was when I was practicing ESP. So this was many years ago. And I was just so in the zone with my psychic abilities, I was just curious to see, I'm just going to try to move something with my mind and see what happens, right? And I didn't really expect much to happen, but I did it. I just held the intention for something to move. When I entered the transcendental state, I just did it, right? I just moved it. What actually happened is I sensed like this energy. That's what it felt like. It felt like some energy came out, shot out of my stomach. And I put this piece of tissue on this like toothpick. And when I shot the energy out of my stomach, the tissue flew off the thing, which was very interesting because I noticed sometimes you see, for people who have seen this, right, there's a lot of telekinesis videos online and they're always using their hands like they're trying to move it like super hard, right, to get the thing to move. And they say, oh, it's not the wind from my hand. Like, I believe it's the wind from their hand. You know what I mean? The majority of the time. But for me, I didn't use my hands at all. My hands were like this. And then I just shot like some energy out of my stomach. And then the tissue flew off the thing. So that was like interesting. And I was like, okay, telekinesis is real, right? So I did not know that until I had done it. And I've never done that again, or never tried to really do that again. Seriously. Now at that time, I had deep charged psychic energy, and I was super depressed, right? That was when I was having demonic experiences like crazy, right? So it wasn't fun, right? That might seem a little bit cool or something, but no, right? It wasn't fun at all. Didn't know at the time, because, this was when this stuff was still pretty new to me. But I 100% believe there were demons all around me. Even to this day, I'm not sure if that was demonic energy. I don't think so, because I don't think I was psychically possessed, right? Wasn't that connected to demons, although I could sense them in my mind, right? I just didn't know what was happening. I'm like, why do I keep seeing these demonic figures? That's never happened to me, right? I never had demonic experiences of the variety that I had when I was practicing psychic abilities, right, or practicing ESP. So yeah, that was the only reason I was able to do that was when I was in a very, very dark state spiritually, right? And so, but the other thing to recognize about that is that's when I was I was transcendentally connecting to something external, right? So this wasn't inside my body, it wasn't a positive intention. So I say that to say when you connect to something externally, there's a good chance that might be negative, right? So I don't know, or it might be illegal to start focusing on objects, transcendentally connecting to them, and trying to manifest your chi in them. Not to mention, it takes a large amount of chi to do stuff like that. Which I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about what life is, and life force, and the spirit, and things like that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. What else? Okay, yeah, so I actually decided I'm just going to cover some of the other topics in the chapter. Then the next video will just be the last video for the chapter. I'm going to talk about life and the spirit. As the other topics I talk about in the book, they're not hugely important, but I decided to throw them in there. So I'll just cover them now just to get it over with. I kind of already talked about plants. That's just one topic I just kind of threw in there. Another topic has to do with chi and having your chi affect other people. So that's something I really haven't thought about much, or definitely haven't practiced it. They do kind of have that topic in Tai Chi or Qigong when they put their chi in other people. I think something like that might be possible. They do something like that to try to heal others. But I think that the person would have to accept it, right? So they have to have the intention that says, I accept your healing energy, or I accept the chi energy coming from you. Because they have an auric field, which is extremely dense, right? And I don't know that the chi can just kind of depot its way in, or push its way in and start manifesting when the chi in the body has not accepted it, right? And has like it has sovereignty over that space, right? So that's what I think. That'll make a little more sense based on what we talk about in chapter 9 and 10. And we'll actually begin chapter 9, I think the video after next. So we're going to start talking about all this stuff with a new formalism. Excuse me. So something like that might be possible, right? But that's it. That's pretty much all I wanted to really mention with that. The other thing, which I think this is the last thing that I wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about plants. I did put that in the book, but that's not super important. That's just kind of another thing I kind of threw in there. But as far as another topic I talk about is hand signs and posture. is I noticed something very interesting. When I charge my subconscious to use my chi, like I said, I haven't done it very much, but the times where I have done it, I feel this kind of odd compulsion to start controlling my hands, right? I'll just start doing hand signs. I feel the need to do it. Don't really know why, right? When I'm charging my subconscious to heal my body, I feel the need to do something like this or like that, or I'll just start doing hand signs. And the way to describe the compulsion, and I put it in the book, it's not super important, but on the website, but it's like I feel the need to like close the circuit is the best way I could describe it, right? I just feel this urge, like I have to close the circuit. Like what circuit I'm closing and why I feel the need to close it, who knows, right? But that's just the compulsion. That's the intuitional urge that I feel when I'm doing that. And I think your hand signs have some type of connection to the way your chi manifests. And when I thought about it, I felt it kind of makes sense. It's not just your hand signs, but even your bodily expression, right? Because normally your ability to manifest chi in a more transcendental way is dampened, right? Your body almost completely blocks it. So you wouldn't notice the link between how the intention you're using to manifest chi and your bodily state or posture, right? Because you never use it that way. You never use it on a conscious level. Your body does all the commanding and tells your chi to help the body function and all that. You don't really do any of that consciously. But when I thought about it, it kind of makes sense. When you start doing it consciously, let's say I hold an intention to heal my body, so I'm manifesting my chi on the transcendental level and on a conscious level, my subconscious still has to switch to a particular frequency, right? In this case, it would be the healing frequency. Every frequency has its own sort of associated organizational pattern, which basically is the kind of arrangement pattern associated with that frequency. And that arrangement pattern could be generated in terms of a story, right? So that would be the affirmational story related to healing, which you use to charge. But it can also be related to the way something looks. So something can look a certain way that's associated with healing or a healed state. And so it kind of makes sense, right? If I'm on a healing frequency, I might feel the need to move in a certain way or have a certain posture, right? Move my hands a certain way. And so if I'm moving my hands in these ways and having these postures and these bodily sort of states or postures associated with the healing frequency, it makes sense that my subconscious should more purely, right, be able to switch to the healing frequency and charge up at their frequency. And just an example, let's say I'm very angry, right? If I'm angry, I'm gonna feel a compulsion to transcendentally control my body, to grimace my face and maybe raise my voice and have an angry voice and move my arms in a certain way. Now, let's say I'm trying to manifest my chi with some attention related to the anger frequency, which would be a terrible thing to do for your body, but let's say I do that, if I'm not moving my body according to the posture associated with the anger frequency, then I'm on some other frequency, I'm producing an intention that switches my subconscious to some other frequency to do some other posture, right? And even though I might still be holding intention that's at the anger frequency, in your subconscious, I can hold an intention that goes to multiple frequencies. I can charge up at multiple frequencies at once. It's not going to be purely at the anger frequency, and therefore I probably won't be able to manifest the chi associated with that frequency as well, right? So the frequency isn't as pure in terms of my subconscious frequency. So I say all of that to say, right, that if I wanted to manifest my chi according to a particular frequency, it makes sense that I would want to move my body in a way that fits that frequency. So I can my subconscious should switch more purely to that frequency, more monochromatically, right? And be less at other frequencies. Because then I could charge more powerfully at that frequency. So that's something I noticed when I was doing this. Specifically I just noticed it with the hand signs, right? That I probably moved my body in a certain way too. I don't really remember. I wasn't really thinking about it. But when I do know that when I was charging my chi to heal, that I would feel this need to do certain hand signs. And even when I was trying to use it for telekinesis, I did it like short times, not really seriously, but I would also feel this need to do hand signs. So that's just something I wanted to mention. In yoga is actually, I think, called mudras, right? The way hand signs are associated with certain types of manifestations. in Tai Chi, I forgot what it's called. It is in Tai Chi though, where they have certain, they'll have certain postures, and it's help. Presumably, the purpose of that is to help you manifest chi in a certain way. So your bodily state, or your hand signs, or your bodily postures, they actually help you to manifest chi. And what's interesting is I think this hand sign, which is associated with prayer, or maybe this, but I feel like this one, when we pray, we feel like a natural urge to do this. And I think this is the sort of hand sign associated with prayer. So you're manifesting in some type of way, right, associated with praying to God. Right. Well, I guess you could pray to other things, but when you should only pray to God, right? Jesus Christ, God the Father, the Holy Spirit. That's my belief, but I believe that's just metaphysical truth. But yeah, you should only pray to God. But when you pray, you generally feel a need to do something like this, and I believe that's another. You feel an urge to do that because something about this posture helps to sort of manifest a prayer, or do some type of manifestation related to prayer. Now, one thing I should mention is that the mudras in yoga, I think, because I always read about people. I read about this girl who, she contacted spirit guides. And I should mention, I don't think I mentioned it last video, like channeling and mediumship, how that works. What they usually do, so we talked about how you can have how you have a normal level of psychic abilities, and that's just your intuition on a very low level, very weak, it's not a strong compulsion that comes from that, and your third eye isn't turned on very much, so your intuition is very weak, kind of vague, but it's still there, right? What the mediums do, is they'll hold an intention, and I've never done it, but this is what I imagine they do. They'll hear from some new age person about spirit guides. We're going to talk more about this principle, because there's kind of a viral principle that goes on. If I'm speaking to a demon, regardless of what name I call it, let's say I call it a spirit guide, and I tell you about contacting spirit guides, and you focus on the spirit guide that's of the nature of the one I'm speaking about, then you're going to contact a demon too, because mine was a demon. I'll explain that principle a little more in either the next chapter or chapter 10. But yeah, so they hear about spirit guides from someone in New Age, right? And then what they'll do is they'll hold the intention to speak to something. It's not God, because that would be the God intention. New Age is specifically about not producing the God intention. So they'll focus on some spirit, they'll hold that intention, and then that intention is a form of consent, so the spirit speaks to them. It says something, but it's very, very vague, but they can feel it to some degree, because they're sensing in the spirit, right? You can't fully turn off your spirit senses. So they sense something in the spirit, then they keep holding intention to listen to more, so they're listening more and more, and then they transcendentally connect to the spirit, the connection becomes stronger, their psychic abilities turn on more. I don't think they actually have to turn on more, but I imagine they would if you're, ultimately when you're transcendentally connecting to the spirit more, yeah, I think your psychic abilities would pretty much have to turn on a little bit more, otherwise the communication wouldn't be very clear. Although you could still have the communication in kind of a vague way eventually, and even in that vagueness, it might become a little more clear just from the increased connection. But I think eventually you would need to have more of your third eye would have to be turned on more so the communication becomes more clear, which is ultimately what I believe always happens in this mediumship. But yeah, so I just wanted to mention that that's how they channel these spirit guides or demons or whatever in mediumship. And so I was reading the story, I was watching a YouTube video about this girl who had done this. She was contacting spirit guides. And she said that they were telling her how to, I'm trying to remember, she was practicing yoga. And she said her spirit guides were telling her how to do things with her hands, to do certain mudras, to astral project. And of course, she got psychically possessed eventually. She started astral projecting whether she wanted to or not. Because like I said, when you're psychically possessed, they can sort of control how you're, they can control what you're, the way we talked about before, as I said, they could control what you're able to sense in the spirit. So you could kind of control your spirit senses, which they do through controlling your subconscious. But also they can control your chi in this case. So they can control how your spirit manifests its chi. And when you astral project, that's actually a usage of your chi. You're using your chi to kind of Normally, I think your chi is, it's controlling your spirit to stay magnetized to your body, right? And that's that's a command that comes from your body. But if you use your intention, you can charge your subconscious to manifest your chi to push your spirit away. So your body's pulling it in, and your intention can kind of push it away. And if it, actually, I shouldn't even really be saying this because I don't really want anybody to astral project. But this is just my theory on it. And if you push your spirit away, you could push it out of that magnetic field, and then you can start. You can put it out of the auric field or whatever the field is that keeps your body in, and then you have a little bit more freedom. But you never should do that in that way. If you want to astral project or travel the spirit realm, you always do it through God, right? And you pray to God and ask Him for that experience, and just wait till He gives it to you, right? You don't really have to do any of this to have experience like that. But I'm just saying that's how those people do it, how other people do it when they do it illegally. Now, so she did that. Like I said, she got psychically possessed, started astral projecting, whether she wanted to or not. And she said that these so-called mudras, right? She says that she thinks she was using them. I saw this video years ago. But she said that she thinks that that when she was doing those mudras, it was actually letting the demons in. And maybe they were, right? So the hand signs are influenced the way your chi manifests. There could be certain hand signs, at least it feels like to me. I don't know, but that was what it seemed like to me. And they do mention that in like these other sort of philosophies, religions, or whatever. But it may be the case that certain hand signs make it easier to be psychically possessed, right? So be careful with that. Be careful with all of this. Always pray to God and ask for protection from God and ask for revelation from God and the Holy Spirit. And just stay close to Jesus, right? You can never go wrong having a relationship with Jesus, staying close to Him and waiting for His guidance before doing anything, right? Supernatural, before doing any of this stuff. Always stay close to Him. What else? Yeah, I think that's it. That's pretty much it. So those are kind of the other topics I wanted to cover. I think in the next video, we're going to cover the topic of life. So my idea of what I think life is, what it really is, how I think it works in the spirit, its connection to chi energy, and things like that. I think we're also going to talk about demonic entities, because that's important in that topic too. And then after that, we're going to move on to chapter 9, where we're going to now talk about the metaphysical realm. We're pretty much going to combine everything we talked about throughout the whole book so far. Book 2 and book 1, of course. And we're going to now put it all together in a kind of new formalism to talk about metaphysics in general. Right, so yeah, that's it for now, though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.